Imagine you have a part of the application which appears many times in different places. And each time it requires a little bit different logic or a little bit different UI. I guess that many of you do not have to imagine such situation because you know it from your own experience. I am Arek Machalica, web developer from Selleo, and this is a case study of metric form list refactoring. So, what I will talk today. So, at first I will show you what was the problem I've encountered. Then I will tell what was the solution I applied. And after that I will show what were the results. So, let's start. Here we have 3 examples of these metric forms, and they differ in the way they are in their complexity. So we have pretty simple examples, like the first one on the top, and we have some medium, like in the middle, and some more complex ones, as that's the case on the bottom. And across the whole application, we had about 20 of such forms. And each of them was handled by one component, which was barely configurable, or it was handled by a dozen of one-off components, which were specific for the case. It caused lots of duplication in the code. So, as you can see, there is some like root or core which is similar, like the actions, like saving, reordering of them, and every time it was handled by custom code or by a spaghetti, basically spaghetti. So, and that on itself wouldn't be that big of a problem, because every feature we are asked to implement causes or makes us creating new such forms. So it was certain that in the future the problem will be bigger. So that actually made me think about the solution, how to mitigate the problem. And at first I started by figuring out what are the results of the change I would like to have. So the first one is the solution should be configurable. So we can just build these forms depending on the situation, just by passing a configuration. So we do not have to, every time we do not have to create a markup, create a logic. Second thing is it should be modular. So whenever there will be a need for new field, then we can just create it and add it and use it whenever we wish to. The second thing is it should be feature rich, and by this I mean it should contain or abstract out the duplicated logic we had in many places. But this third point is actually kind of dangerous, and I will talk about it a little bit later. So I figured out with some help the solution to basically slice these forms into fields or group of fields which contain their own logic. So basically, after that, we had a bunch of separate components which behave like Legos. So we can just build our form from them on demand. And you can see they are wrapped in the borders, the specific ones. But the solution has also the second part, which is the metric form list. It's a component which wraps these extracted fields and handles a lot of stuff which were not assigned to a specific field, like saving the metric or reordering them, or basically building or collecting the blocks and building the form from them. So I managed to implement that solution, and now it's about 3 or 4 months after that, so I can tell you about how it worked actually, because nothing has only a good sides. So we will start with the good ones. So I managed to achieve this configurability, so we can just pass an object which defines the way the form should look like, and basically it's built automatically for us. Another one is separation of responsibilities. Previously we had a lot of mess, everything was tangled together, but now every field, as I showed earlier, contains their own logic, and this helps a lot to figure out how it works. Yeah, as a lot of the shared logic was extracted to the component, to this symmetric form list component, we no longer have to take care about stuff like saving, reordering, validation. It's done automatically for us. Modularity, so we had already added a few new components with one of our friends on the project, and from what I remember, he seemed to be pretty happy about the solution, how it worked. So that's pretty nice. And we were able to achieve a significant decrease of the code base. So we managed to decrease our application size by over 5,000 lines of code, which is, I would say, it's huge. And that's due to the one-off components. They all have their own specs, which tested roughly the same thing. So, yeah, and in that code, of course, who knows how many bugs were creeping. So that they were also removed. But nothing is gold. So the solution also had some downsides. One of which is that it was not very straightforward to do, and it actually took about 3 weeks for one person, for me to implement this solution, to think it through, and to replace some of the usages across the application. Another thing is the complexity had to go somewhere, so now we have these separate fields, but they sometimes might get in the interaction between themselves. So one field create or trigger update, which triggers update of the other, and they go into infinite loop. So we need to address such situations and implement and update the logic of that fields. So we also need to be very careful when we extend or change the solution, because it's used in about roughly 20 places in the application. So if we change the implementation detail, it might work in one place, but it might break many more somewhere else. So we need to be very careful about that. And I also did not manage and also didn't want to handle all cases, because every new feature, every edge case implemented and extracted to that abstraction would increase the complexity. And because it's used in many places, the increase of complexity might render this solution unmanageable for us. So it's this balance between having a lot of features in it, but not being that much complex that we will not be able to work on it. And the last thing, amongst many others, is that it's harder to test. So it's used in many places, as I already mentioned. So if we change the core, this metric formalist, the QA team needs to check every place it's used in the application. So it's rather hard on their side, and it makes changing the core harder. So to rehearse quickly, the problem was that we had a lot of duplicated feature which appears multiple times, and every time it needs a little bit different logic. And we know that it will be, we will add new of them in the future. I managed to figure that out or fix that issue by extracting it to one or split field components, and then wrap it into one, which handles a lot of that logic for us. And in the end, I think the biggest win is that we were able to decrease our code base and actually speed up our development quite significantly, because now it's just passing a configuration and you are all ready. And the downside is that you need to, when working with that solution, you need to be more like a surgeon. So you need to be very careful, and you need to think all of your actions, not to break anything. And from that place, I would like to thank lead developer Tomasz Bąk, who was assisting me and providing help and support with that feature and many good ideas. And I wouldn't be able to pull that off myself. So thank him, and thank you for your attention.